गतह्रियामतिमत्वा असतां विगर्हिताम्. हरे कृष्ण.
हरे कृष्ण। तं निसारान्तं सलिलाद् अनुद्रुतो हिरण्यकेशो धीराम्दम् अथा यशः करालदंष्टम् अशनीनिभाषानो अभ्रीत् गता ह्रियां किं त असातं विवर्जितम्। हरे कृष्ण।
तं निसरन्तं सलिलादनुवृतो हिरण्यकेशो दुरदं यथा झसः करालदंश्रोऽसनिनिस्वनो ब्रवीत् गतार्यं किं त्वसतां विगर्हितम्.
Anyone else? Okay. Tam, him. Nisarantam, coming out. Salilat, from the water. Anudrutaha, chaste. Hiranyakeshaha, having golden hair. Dviradam, an elephant. Yata, as. Jashaha, a crocodile. Karala dangstraha, having fearful teeth. Ashani nisvanaha, roaring like thunder. Abravit, he said. Gata hriyam, for those who are shameless. Kim, what? Tu, indeed. Asatam, for the wretches. Vigarhitam, reproachable. Translation by Abhaycharan Aravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The demon, Hiranyaksha, who had golden hair on his head and fearful tusks, gave chase to the Lord, Varaha, while he was rising from the water, even as an alligator would chase an elephant. Roaring like thunder, he said, "Are you not ashamed of running away before a challenging adversary? There is nothing reproachable for shameless creatures." Purport. When the Lord was coming out of the water, taking the earth in his arms to deliver it, the demon derided him with insulting words. But the Lord did not care, because he was very conscious of his duty. For a dutiful man there is nothing to fear. Similarly, those who are powerful have no fear of derision or unkind words from an enemy. The Lord had nothing to fear from anyone, yet he was merciful to his enemy by neglecting him. Although apparently he fled from the challenge, it was just to protect the earth from the calamity that he tolerated Hiranyaksha's. It was just to protect the earth from the calamity that he tolerated Hiranyaksha's deriding words. Translation again. The demon, who had golden hair on his head and fearful tusks, gave chase to the Lord while he was rising from the water, even as an alligator would chase an elephant. Roaring like thunder, he said, "Are you not ashamed of running away before a challenging adversary? There is nothing reproachable for shameless creatures." Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitanamane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarne Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Eva Chapaditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. I'm going to start with a question. It's an easy one. Who can tell me what Bhagavan means? Anyone? I know all of you could tell me. Many of you are probably busy doing other things, so you can't unmute. But who would like to unmute and just say what Bhagavan means?
God.
God, yes, very good. Bhagavan refers to God. And in particular, Bhagavan refers to something also a little more specific, specific features of God. Who can tell me that?
He has all opulences.
All opulences, yes. Very good, very good. Bhagavan refers to all opulences. So, of course, Srila Prabhupada explains this to us many times throughout his books. I'm going to read one such explanation. This is from Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verse 2 purport, wherein Srila Prabhupada writes, the Sanskrit word Bhagavan is explained by the great authority Parasara Muni, the father of Vyasadeva, the Supreme Personality who possesses all riches, all strength, all fame, all beauty, all knowledge, and all renunciation is called Bhagavan. Right? So as Nrsimha Prahlada Deshva Prabhu, Bara Prabhu, mentioned, Bhagavan means full of all opulences, meaning all 6 of them completely, right? Others may have some of these opulences, but only the Supreme Lord, whom everything comes from, can possess all of those opulences in full. And no matter how much he gives of them, he still has all of them completely. Okay, so then there are 6 opulences, or attractive traits, we can call them, that exist. And Sri Krishna, of course, possesses all 6 of these in full, completely. I remember actually, when I first heard about this, what the meaning of Bhagavan was in these, and I heard the list of these opulences. When the devotee that was telling me about this mentioned renunciation, I was a bit confused, right? I could certainly see how strength and wisdom and wealth and beauty and fame would be considered as opulent, right? Most people would agree that these traits are attractive. But it seemed to me, anyway, at the time, that renunciation would only be attractive to a select few people, right? There weren't many people that, first of all, were renounced, let alone striving to be renounced. From my point of view, this is coming from a teenager living in suburbia. So the experiences that I had back then, were fairly limited, but renunciation wasn't necessarily what most people I came in contact with would consider to be an opulence, right? Because generally, when most people think of like either a minimalist, or when they think of someone who voluntarily refrains from all of the things that give most people pleasure, they consider that type of person to be strange. Right. We as aspiring Vaishnavas, we, as part of our practice, take vows to refrain from certain things. And those things just happen to be what most people consider to be the staples of human existence, right? Necessities even. it wasn't that long ago, relatively speaking, that doctors would claim that a vegetarian diet is unhealthy because you actually need to have the human body needs to have these proteins that are found in eating flesh. But of course, as time went on, scientifically that had been proven wrong, and actually they found that actually the vegetarian diet is much more healthy for the human being, right? The way that our digestive system works, much more healthy, right? But since in general, people in general, that's just considered to be food. They find it strange when someone is refraining from that. So several years ago, it's going on, okay, a couple decades ago actually now, I used to work a job, a seasonal job, and with a bunch of artists, we would compose artistic pieces for tourists, basically, for part of the year. And so occasionally, the group of artists would go and spend some time together outside of work. And in these situations, you would get these things, and I'm sure most of us can relate to this, where either friends from work or even family members or old friends, they'll say, "Okay, hey, let's go out and have drinks." Oh, actually, no, I don't drink, but we can go out and go to eat or something. And then they say, "Oh, there's this there's this new steakhouse that opened that I've been dying to go to." And I'm like, I'd rather not go to a place like that. I'm vegetarian. Okay. All right. So then, maybe we can go someplace and, try to scope out some, some attractive people, right? No, yeah, I'm not into that either. But, and so then they end up saying, okay, well, let's see what's left. How about let's go to the dog track, have some fun, watch the dogs race around, gamble a little bit. Oh yeah, no, I actually don't do that either. And then so they just kind of, give up, and they think, okay, you go home and, have your salad and a good glass of water and, go to bed early and waste your life, right? People think it's strange when others are renounced from the things that they consider to be just necessities or building blocks of human existence, right? And although sometimes the concept of simplicity or renunciation becomes semi-popular in certain parts of society, it's generally short-lived, and people will return to their pursuit of happiness by chasing around things to accumulate. So a few of these more recent concepts that became popular were people building tiny houses, and something called van life, where people would build just like essentially, everything you need, a bed, some cabinets, a place to pump water, etc., inside of a van, and like a tall van, so you could at least stand up in, and then you just drive that around and visit all the places you've always wanted to visit, and you're also living in the van. So that's sort of a simple lifestyle. But generally, the people that build these tiny houses, or means the ones that are actually simple, they can do it. But when it became popular and people were trying to do it, they came to realize that it's not sustainable for them, that lifestyle. I actually had some very close friends that they wanted to downsize, so they didn't move into a tiny house by any stretch of the imagination. It was a fairly big house, but it was much smaller than the house that they came from. And they thought that they were going to get rid of a lot of the stuff that they had before that they had no need for, and they wanted to focus on a simple life. Um, but they were still quite attached to all of those things, and so they basically just the other things they just remained in storage for some time as they were living in this smaller house. But since they still had this consciousness of having these other things, then they had to return to a bigger house. So they left that behind. And also with the van life, generally people will give it a go. They'll do it for a few months, and then that's that. Now, again, like I mentioned, there are people that are able to do it full time, both of those things. But as far as it becoming popular, the trend would then die off because most people don't understand the principle of renunciation. They can understand in theory how it can be beneficial, more cost effective, give you time to focus on more important things. But when it all comes down to it, if the principle of renunciation isn't understood, then it doesn't work, right? Then you end up doing Palgo Vairagya, and then we all know how that turns out. So renunciation, to me at least at that time, when I heard about those 6 opulences, it seemed like more of a niche virtue than a commonly accepted attractive trait, right? It was certainly valuable. I understood that it had value, but it just wasn't popular with the masses, right? So it was surprising when I heard that renunciation is an opulence, right? Most people will think it's the opposite, right? If you either have the opulences or, if you renounce and you don't have the opulences. This is most people's reasoning, right? So that was my initial understanding or my initial impression. But as time went on, I came to appreciate renunciation as actually the most attractive of all of the qualities of these opulences. And it's not just because I am some kind of strange person. I am also a strange person. But that's not the only reason why I came to understand that renunciation is actually the most attractive. Now, I want to explain it in such a way that most people would actually agree that renunciation is the most attractive quality. Not just for a niche group, but for everyone. But before I do that, I certainly don't want to leave these other qualities out, these other opulences. So let's just talk about those, because balance, of course, is important. Since it's Kali Yuga, I'll start with wealth, right? Most people understand that wealth has value, right? People are attracted to money because it allows them to accumulate things, places, people, security, entertainment, exclusive perks, immunity from laws. So wealth is attractive for most people. Most people, find wealth to be attractive. They would like to acquire that by whatever means they can. And of course, beauty is also obviously attractive, right? So first we'll talk about these two, wealth and beauty. In fact, beauty, the word attractive is commonly used as a synonym for beautiful, right? You see someone that's beautiful, you say they're attractive, right? So people want to make themselves more beautiful with clothing and jewelry, ornamentation, special diets, workout regimens, plastic surgery, and so on. And they also want to attract others who they think are beautiful so they can enjoy spending time with them, right? And most advertisements these days, and for quite a long time before, prove that beauty is an attractive trait because they use it to sell essentially everything, right? Even things that it doesn't even make sense to advertise with, a beautiful figure. But somehow that's what sells. So, they'll find a way, Right. So these two were the main attractive, popular opulences for the majority of all people, right? There are several songs out there that glorify the necessity to accumulate beautiful partners and abundance of money, right? Usually these are referred to in much less flattering language, right? If you know, you know, but it's not important. But this is also confirmed in Shastra. This isn't just something that people nowadays have observed and sing about in their own language. This is also sung about in the Shastra, right? The very name Hiranyakashipu. So today we're reading about Hiranyaksha, and we learn that Hiranyaksha means one with golden hair. But his brother, Hiranyakashipu, does anyone want to tell me what Hiranyakashipu means? You don't have to. That's fine. So Hiranya means gold, which we know from Hiranyaksha, and Kashipu means like a soft bed. This is something that Srila Prabhupada often also explains. So here's one. In purport of Sri Upanishad Mantra 11, Srila Prabhupada says, Hiranya means gold and Kashipu means soft bed. This cunning gentleman, Hiranyakashipu, was interested in these two things, money and women, and he wanted to enjoy them by becoming immortal. Right. So we see that these two, as pointed out in the Shastra, and as we can observe just with our own perception, these two are going to be the main popular opulences, wealth and beauty, or money and women. Now, just to give a little bit of clarity on what Srila Prabhupada means by women in this context, here's a conversation from 1972 in Honolulu, and then there are plenty of these where Srila Prabhupada makes this clarification so that in this context people understand what is meant by women. So this is in 1972 in Honolulu. Srila Prabhupada says, the whole world is now full of demons only. They are after money and women, that is all. And then he continues, woman does not mean this form of woman, right? The external body. A man can also be woman, right? So it means prakriti and purusha, or the enjoyed and the enjoyer. Srila Prabhupada continues, if the two parties, one party is trying to enjoy the other party, that is man and woman. It does not mean the form of women and men, right? It just means the idea of being the enjoyer. That means masculine position, and trying to enjoy something. That means the feminine position, or prakriti and purusha, we can say, right? So whatever we consider to be beauty, whatever we're attracted to that we're trying to exploit for our own needs or wants, desires, if we're considering ourselves the enjoyer, then whatever it is that we're trying to enjoy, that represents women in this context, right? So prakriti and purusha. Anyway, so that's wealth and beauty. Those are the first two. Those are obvious to almost everyone. Almost everyone can agree that these things are attractive opulences, right? Now, the next two, they're still obviously attractive to most people, but they have slightly less emphasis than the first two. They're slightly less popular, and that's strength and fame, right? So we have wealth, beauty, obvious. Strength and fame, also pretty obvious, but just a little less popular. So with strength, one feels capable to provide sufficient security to oneself and their loved ones, right? Now, if one has wealth, one can also do that just in different ways, right? One can hire those with strength. But oftentimes, unscrupulous people use their strength to try to accumulate wealth and beauty, the higher two, or the more popular two, I should say, by exploitation, right? They use their strength to steal people who are wealthy and steal their money, or to kidnap someone that's beautiful just because they're strong, right? Um, there's plenty of examples also uh, in our own tradition. Um, but I generally, when I talk about this, for some reason, it's just because of my conditioning, I always cite Arthurian legend, a legend of King Arthur. So one of the main takeaways from King Arthur and his pastimes, if you will, is that strength does not give you the right to do what you want. But one should use their strength to establish what actually is right. In other words, might does not equal right. You should use might for right. Use your strength for righteous purposes. And so King Arthur, he tried to overthrow many corrupt kings who were exploiting their citizens, right? So, yeah, strength is sometimes used in unscrupulous ways. So are wealth, beauty, as we mentioned before, all of them. Fame, the next one, fame, it's when someone is influential, charismatic, charming, right? Someone that can sway people's ideas, opinions, right? So these two, the strong and the persuasive or famous, these opulences are generally used to pursue the first two, right? To pursue wealth or beauty. People generally use strength and fame to accumulate wealth and beauty, but they are also attractive on their own, right? If someone just has strength, even though they're not trying to, become beautiful or wealthy, it's still on its own attractive. And same with fame, right? So that's strength and fame. So the next one we're going to talk about is wisdom or knowledge, right? Wisdom, that's less popular than the previous four, especially in Kali Yuga. Even though we rely on wisdom for everything we do or everything we depend on, since it's rarer for people to pursue and cultivate wisdom or knowledge, it's not considered these days to be as attractive as wealth, beauty, strength, and fame. The funny thing is, unless you're born with one of or a combination of these four more popular traits, one actually requires wisdom to attain them, right? You can't get them without knowing how these things work, right? Whether it's naturally or artificially, right? Doing the natural way or figuring out a way to make an artificially increase these things. And those who were born with those traits, they actually relied on wisdom in a previous life to attain them. So wisdom is actually essential, right? It isn't as popular, but it's essential. And for some people, it's also attractive even on its own, right? Without trying to pursue these other ones, without pursuing those first four. But generally, unless it's attached to one of those previous four, it's not as popular, right? It's quite valuable still. Knowledge is power, right? But not necessarily very, very popular these days. Just to give an example of what I mean there, I am currently transmitting to all of you through an Apple laptop. And when people think of Apple computers, maybe I'll ask, you guys are shy today, but who do we think of when we think of Apple computers? First name that comes to mind.
Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, right. I got two people that said Steve Jobs. Exactly. Steve Jobs. Now, was Steve Jobs, is his primary trait intelligence, wisdom, knowledge? Is that his opulent trait? He was smart enough to understand a good idea, but he's not the one that actually developed Apple computers. He had the charisma, right? So he was the fame behind Apple computers, right? Now you have Wozniak and several others who were the brains behind it, right? They're not as popular. They're the ones that actually built the systems that we're using. Jobs is famous because he was influential. He was able to convince these people who had the intelligence to work for him and build these systems and adjust them the way that you know means they would do all the intelligent work, and then he would do like the marketing type work, right? So he's the face of it. He's the fame, but the intelligence, they're the people that are more behind the scenes that most people don't actually know about. They've never heard of, right? So generally speaking, unless knowledge is attached to one of the previous four, it's not as popular. Still quite valuable, and even, as I said, essential, but not as popular, right? That's why, back when we went to school, the people that were playing sports were much more popular than the people that were becoming academics, right? Generally. So the sixth opulence, renunciation, at first glance, as we mentioned, it seems to be, from our point of view, from observation, the least popular attractive trait. But when you really think about it, as I mentioned at the beginning of this session, it is the most attractive of these six qualities, right? And so now I want to prove that. Oh, before I give my thesis here, or before I start to prove or try to establish my thesis here, I have a little disclaimer. Because all of these qualities are inherently spiritual, they are all unlimitedly attractive, right? There's not really a hierarchy, right? But because in the material world we pursue these things not for their intended purpose, but instead for our own independent enjoyment, we perceive them differently, and therefore we assign them value in a hierarchy. And it depends on the circumstance, right? If we're in a circumstance where, trapped on a desert island with no resources, we're very much all of a sudden going to appreciate the person who has cultivated knowledge, because they know how to get these resources. Those who are stronger are going to be all of a sudden more popular than those who are wealthy, because wealth doesn't help you on a deserted island, right? So depending on the circumstance, some of these can, move around in how we assign their value. But in general, right, these days, this is how we assign these values. So for our purposes, for now, we're speaking about them in terms of how we perceive them here in the material world. And then we'll talk about how we, can engage them properly, of course. Now, to show why I consider renunciation as the most attractive of all qualities, we'll do a little mind exercise. So think of someone who is, we'll stick with the first two since they're most popular, who is either very wealthy or very beautiful, or both, right? A hypothetical person. Although as we go on, someone might come to mind as we start talking about this. Try to keep it hypothetical. So you're thinking of someone that's either super wealthy, right? Trillionaire, billionaire, or quadrillionaire, etc., quintillionaire, or extremely beautiful, meaning ideal to your every personal preference, right? Body type, skin color, eye color, clothes, everything, right? Aesthetically, your ideal vision of beauty. So think of one of those, either someone with unlimited wealth or unlimited beauty. Now, next, picture that this person that you're picturing, they actually very much know how wealthy or beautiful they are, and thus they treat everyone else as unworthy, right? Less than. So imagine that that person uses their attractive trait to exploit everyone they come in contact with. And moreover, they use their influence of that opulence to further causes that you are strongly morally opposed to. Is that person still attractive? Not so much, right? The energy goes from kinetic to potential really fast. So the external manifestation of these opulences aren't truly what is attractive, right? Now, think of someone else who has unlimited wealth. We'll just stick with wealth this time. And they're not affected negatively by it in any way, right? They're not greedy. They're not misers. They use their wealth to lend a hand to good people who are just less fortunate, and they never consider themselves superior in any way, right? They see it as a privilege to be able to lend a hand when a hand is needed, right? This person that we just this person that we just talked about, they started out attractive, and then they became more attractive by their behavior, right? The first person we were thinking about, they started out attractive, and then they became less and less attractive as we understood what their character was, right? What their driving motive was and what their actions were, right? And this is because the second person we were talking about is renounced, right? Renunciation makes each of these other 5 qualities more attractive. Therefore, that's why I propose that renunciation is the most attractive of all the 6 opulences. Renunciation enhances each of these other 5. And without at least some renunciation, all the other 5 are just actually annoying, right? If someone's super rich but not at all renounced, it's annoying. Someone's super beautiful but not at all renounced, it's annoying. Someone's very strong but not at all renounced, it's annoying, right? We all know these people that are just fanatically in one of these categories, and that's all they think about. And it's annoying, right? So renunciation makes beauty more beautiful. It makes wealth more impressive. It makes strength more powerful. It makes fame more influential. It makes wisdom or knowledge more enlightening. All of them, all 5 of them, become more attractive with renunciation. So therefore, at the risk of sounding like a skipping record, I propose that renunciation is the most attractive of all these 6 opulences. But there is still something even more attractive than that, right? So you have these 6 opulences that are attractive, of course, but there's something that's even more attractive than that. And that brings us to today's verse. Lord Varaha is an avatar of Lord Vishnu, who is full in all 6 opulences, including strength. And this strong, powerful demon is taunting him by hurling insults at him, right? But Lord Varaha is unaffected by this foolish banter because he's not attached to his strength, right? He's renounced from it. Hiranyaksha actually has a limited amount of strength, but he's proud of that minute power because compared to everyone else he's come in contact with so far, anyone else he's encountered, his strength was far superior, right? So even though he has a little bit of strength compared to Lord Varaha, he's not renounced. He's proud of it. But Varahadev, he possesses all strength and all the other ones, but he's not attached to it. He's not proud of it, right? Varahadev, being the source of all strength, has unlimited strength, and yet he uses it to protect his devotees, right? Hiranyaksha, with his limited power, wants to exploit others and do harm. Varahadev, with complete power, is just using it to protect his devotees. So although Lord Varaha is not attached to his strength, right, he shows that he's very renounced from it. He's not affected by the taunting words of Hiranyaksha. He doesn't need to prove that he's actually far more powerful than him. So he's ignoring him. He's taking his devotees away. So he's not attached to his strength, but he is attached to his devotees. And that, by far, is the most attractive thing that exists, right? The source of everything that is attractive is attracted by love, right? He's conquered and overwhelmed by pure loving devotion. So the true attractiveness of anything, and of any opulence, is using it to engage in activities with the ones we love, right? That's the principle of opulence. That's ras, right? Without that principle, the details of opulences are just pale imitations with no true value, right? Not all that glitters is gold, as they say. So in today's verse, we get to see both sides of how to and how not to display one's opulence, right? Don't do it like Hiranyaksha to exploit others. Do it like the Supreme Lord for the good of everyone. And most importantly, first focus on those who are dear to you, and once they are safe, if necessary, you can deal with the rest. So for us, aspiring Vaishnavas, we are to see these opulences in their original state instead of their perverted reflections. So instead of trying to use these opulences to serve our senses, we need to learn how to properly and favorably engage them in their true form, right? In their spiritual form, in Krishna's service. We can offer anything to Krishna, whether or not we think we have anything of value to offer, right? Even if our offerings are not beautiful, not expensive, not powerful, not famous or intelligent, even if all we have is a little bit of water that we collected from a stream, or a leaf that we found just in the forest, or a wildflower, if we offer that with love, he will accept it. We know this from Bhagavad Gita. So love is the most valuable thing. Right? That's why bhakti is mentioned twice in that verse, patram pushpam palam toyam, yo me bhaktya prachati, tadham bhakti upaharitam asami prayatatmanaha. It's not about the leaf, the flower, the fruit, or the water. It's about the devotion that one offers it with. So even if you have nothing, you can find these things in nature. Krishna is giving you these things so that you can offer them back to him with love and devotion. He'll accept that. So love is the most valuable thing, much more opulent than wealth, beauty, strength, wisdom, renunciation. I missed one. Fame. I missed fame. Right? Love is the most valuable thing. And if we have love and we are renounced, we will offer whatever we have access to him. Right? Now, of course, today we also could have talked about tolerance, because Lord Varaha was showing a great deal of tolerance. And that's also a very important lesson to cultivate, but I couldn't resist spreading the glories of true renunciation, right? Because oftentimes, and for a long time, I was wondering why renunciation was considered an opulence. But as I started to understand how Krishna interacts with his devotees, I came to appreciate renunciation as a necessary aspect of any of these qualities. Okay, that is where we will stop. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion on this subject matter or any other?
I had a question.
Sure.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm in college right
Can
now.
you hear me okay?
One moment, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't expecting you to be on this quickly. Yes.
I can't hear you.
One moment. I actually have a doctor's appointment that just started, so I have to sign off.
No problem.
I'm so sorry. I do want to
I
answer your
can't
question.
hear you.
Okay, I gotta go. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Are you muted?